supersized gorilla with a sense of justice and the desire to protect his friends, who also struggles from being incredibly lonely. What's there not to hate? With all jokes aside, it's pretty annoying when you have to give credit to one side of the aisle when there are opponents set against each other, when people immaturely discredit you by accusing you of hating the other side. Having a preference for one thing over another doesn't necessarily mean you hate the other thing. I have a preference for baggy pants over short anime skirts. I still love short anime skirts. I would just prefer to wear one more than the other. Or another preference, I have a preference for sushi and fish over red meat, but I still love beef. So if some of you like certain girls or guys of certain ethnicity over another, but if you choose Nigerian women over Puerto Ricans, doesn't mean that you hate Puerto Ricans. It's a quite ridiculous way of thinking. With all that being said, a lot of the fans of the franchise might be misconstruing people's preference of Godzilla as automatic hatred towards King Kong, and that is not the case. But then there are those who actually literally, viscerally hate Kong, and this is why. Godzilla is a power fantasy character, a hero who acts as a stand-in for the viewer and displays an improbable amount of power and dominance. It's seen as wish fulfillment or escapism. This is similar to Superman and One Punch Man, or basically every superpowered character that has the ability to annihilate nations. To people looking up to Godzilla from this lens is almost akin to worship, and worship is usually a result of a religion. What happens when something threatens their religion or to break the illusion of their so-called god? People get irrationally and viscerally angry and defensive. So when you bring in something like Kong, what is essentially just a very supersized gorilla-like entity, that's literally all there is to it. He's just an ape that roars, beats his chest, and has very strong arms. Putting him up against Godzilla can be seen as very insulting to fans of Godzilla because this is comparable to placing an ordinary mortal in a fighting ring with someone as powerful as Zeus or the Abrahamic god. The idea that the writer of such a scenario entertains the very probability that such a mere mortal could remotely have a chance at defeating their god really rubs them the wrong way. And so it essentially ruins that power fantasy illusion for so many of them, ergo creating a toxic outburst unwarrantedly to people who might not be that invested in fantasy characters playing out a fantasy scenario. These cultish fans seem to become so bonded with the idea of the Godzilla character and what he represents for them. Consequently, when the godlike being is depicted in a vulnerable state, or when his invincibility is even slightly called into question, it can disrupt the spellbinding illusion that these fans have woven around their beloved icon. And the only way they accept such an outcome where their beloved god loses, or when the pseudo-logic falls apart within the universe, is if their beloved god is beaten by another god or a force far more formidable. But a supersized monkey with no powers, that is the largest insult. It's like taking a 3-year-old who's never played basketball in their life and putting them in a one-on-one game against Michael Jordan and having them win because of plot armor.
Stop it.
Yet they are quick to make excuses during the numerous times Godzilla has lost against someone else, or obviously received assistance from humans, or relied on some other external factor. Now, I will concede to the perception that it's quite ridiculous to expect a supersized ape with no powers to remotely have a chance against a walking nuclear reactor and radiation-spewing supersized crocodilian dinosaur thing that can regenerate and is 80 times more difficult to kill. I will say that I do have a preference for Godzilla mainly because he's reptilian. In my eyes, he's a dragon-like creature that's very powerful, and I love the idea of him being someone not to fuck with. But I also do have a soft spot for Kong because he is the underdog and because he's the most relatable kaiju in my opinion. Maybe because he's a primate. See, hating on Kong just for hating him is understandable on some level, but the very things that much of the community hate him for is the very thing that the majority of moviegoers would love him for. Think about it. In every other movie, people usually cheer on the underdog. An underdog is a person, team, or entity that is expected to lose or perform poorly in a given situation. They are usually considered to be at a disadvantage compared to their opponent or competitors, and are often seen as unlikely to succeed. Despite this, the underdogs often have a strong sense of determination, and may surprise others by winning against all odds.
不能歇了，真的够了，别打了。
Karate Kid movie, the term underdog is often associated with and known for themes of resilience, perseverance, and the triumph of the human spirit. That would definitely fit the King Kong situation when faced against a demon like Godzilla. We cheer for Kong whenever he's going up against any other monster that you would think he would lose against, but apparently Godzilla is far above those. Odd when you consider that despite Godzilla not being able to beat up Mechagodzilla in the Godzilla vs. Kong movie, and Kong had his ass handed to him by Godzilla, Kong, the underdog that could not beat Godzilla, was able to beat the monster that beat up Godzilla, even though it was clear that he had help from both the humans and Godzilla. But I will never forget the comical statement by the amazing Lucas.
Follow me, right? Follow me, okay? If A beats B, and then C beats A, how the flying hell does B then beat C? Not to spoil anything, does that make sense to anyone? Does that make sense to anyone?
So there are many people, including him, that were concerned that the underdog couldn't beat Godzilla but was able to beat the monster who beat up Godzilla. There are many times when certain situations will be arranged so that the underdog can win, or the underdog uses its intellect, or more simply, the story is just written that way. I think the Godzilla vs. Kong movie did a good job at making everything as realistic as possible, given that this is a fantasy world with kaiju creatures. The other element to why people might have an adverse reaction to a kaiju like Kong is because he doesn't have any powers. You can look at characters like Batman that technically don't have any powers, yet it's excusable because Batman uses his wealth and intelligence to create devices and situations that allow him to have an edge against superpowered individuals. While Kong has intelligence, it doesn't seem to be superior to the point where you can recognize him having an obvious edge over his opponents, especially when you consider he's going up against a creature that fights other superpowered individuals and wins and can be dropped from out of the sky and still live.
The hell did I just drop?
It's also understandable that people would feel resentment towards Kong because he's a titular character as well, and they know it's possible for him to become the face of the Monsterverse when Godzilla is the one who actually started it. In other words, they don't want Godzilla sharing his throne with anyone. Especially in recent movies, it's also obvious that the humans are more concerned with Kong than they are with Godzilla. But I would argue that they have reason to be because Godzilla is literally a threat for Kong. Everyone understands that Kong can easily be killed by Godzilla, especially at the current stage that Kong was in within the Godzilla vs. Kong movie. They have more relatability to Kong and he's more easily controlled than on the human side. Godzilla keeps the balance of nature for the most part, and he's not against killing humans, I'm sure, if they become an issue. Kong, however, has a higher sense of morality, especially when it comes to apes and other creatures. Kong doesn't seek to control, he doesn't want to be controlled either, while Godzilla seeks to control, and it definitely is out of the question that he cannot be controlled. It's just interesting to observe all the qualities about Kong that make him a good protagonist, and apparently make him hated among Godzilla fans. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.